And I have a passion for helping fintechs and policymakers navigate the 21st century challenges of technology and regulation. And we're going to focus in this panel a little more on the technology side, weaving some regulatory themes through. And I'm going to ask each of the panelists now in turn to introduce their amazing companies and technologies to you and set that in a transatlantic context. So I'll start this time to my right with Ryan from Ripple.
Hey, bonjour. I'm Ryan Zagone from Ripple. I don't know any other French, so that's all you're going to get. Ripple is a company that is modernizing the cross-border payments. So when we think about data today, we can move that seamlessly, internationally, basically free anywhere in the world. But when we go to move value, like a payment or money, we have a very different experience. The cross-border payment today will take 2 to 4 days, and it goes into a black box where you can't track the status, you don't know the fees, you don't know how much gets delivered until several days later. So Ripple has developed a new solution. It's a blockchain and digital asset-based solution that allows financial institutions to make a real-time cross-border payment. So we can take the settlement time from 2 to 4 days down to under 4 seconds, and we're enabling full transparency in that payment.
The last 2 years' experience, frankly, has been very heartwarming and has provided a great deal of optimism that this will happen again going forward. With the tough decisions that lie ahead and the work that lies ahead, the esprit de corps that's been established there, the diversity of the task force is coming together with, this criteria as an example. 36 criteria, 36 pages of written words that 97% of this collaborative group approved is really astonishing work, and we expect now that we're going to be able to carry that momentum forward to actually achieve the vision they've laid out. When you look at what's happened around the world, many of those economies and countries have affected their change with a mandate, with either a central bank or the central government deciding that they're going to do X with their payment system. In our country, we've taken a different tact and said it's going to be very difficult for us to get Washington to focus on an issue like this, but if we create our own future and are proactive about what we want and collaborate together, we're probably going to end up with something better than what our friends in Washington could come up with. So the process so far has yielded great results. This effectiveness criteria is, one example of the effectiveness of that collaboration effort, and the benefits that are going to accrue if you look at that criteria, whatever perspective you want to look at, as an end user, a business, or a consumer, or as a provider, or as a central bank. You look at that effectiveness criteria and say, if we did something close to this, it would be one heck of an improvement to our payment system, and why wouldn't we want to do that? Yeah, the governance framework's critical, and in the paper you'll see there's one slide or a chart that's really illustrative of the roadmap that we see happening with these 10 recommendations that the task force put forth. And it actually has dates when we'd like to see certain things happen. We believe the task force work, and the task force believes that those 10 areas they've focused on for next steps towards this journey of a faster, ubiquitous payments capability can be achieved if we get after those. And from a Federal Reserve perspective, we're committed. We issued a paper in September 6th, I believe, that indicates our commitment from a central bank perspective to continue to help the industry drive towards that 2020 vision on faster. So we're excited about it. I think the industry is excited about it, and I don't anticipate I don't see any reasons why this should slow down or will slow down.
Tech giants are disrupting every industry, and banking could be next. 1/3 of consumers indicate they would switch to Google, Amazon, or Facebook if they offered financial services. Despite evidence that digital channels reduce a bank's transaction cost by 95%, our research reveals less than half of brand homepages are optimized for mobile services, and just 16% show up in the top 10 search results for relevant non-branded keywords. With 9 in 10 millennial consumers now using digital to access financial services, the future likely belongs to digitally adept banks. A winner, Procter & Gamble, for laying down the law on digital. Last week, the world's largest advertiser rolled out strict metric and third-party verification requirements for the companies it works with. P&G will no longer pay any digital media company, ad tech firm, or agency that fails to comply.
We don't want to waste time and money on a crappy media supply chain.
CPG firms have a lot at stake as consumer spending shifts online. E-commerce sales will contribute half of CPG growth, jumping from $8 billion in 2013 to an estimated $36 billion in 2018. However, this growth comes off a small base as less than 5% of CPG products are purchased online.
CKJ Crypto News, Ripple Pioneers, XRP Pioneers, I'd like to welcome everybody to the show. Thanks for tuning in. Ripple XRP Mass Adoption 2020. Mass Adoption 2020. I found some more groups that Ryan Zagone, Ripple's regulator, is involved in. I've tied Ryan Zagone to the World Bank, the IMF, the Faster Payments Task Force. Now today I found a new group called the CSBC. It's the Conference of State Bank Supervisors. This is a United States group that's working on regulation. Now here we've pretty much started a recurring theme that this innovation is ahead of regulation, and that's what the problem is. That's why we haven't seen them moon prices that everybody's been waiting for. But I'm trying to tell you, Ripple Pioneers, if you be patient, this technology will be adopted by the world. We will go over this new group I found, but I've also tied Ryan Zagone, Ripple XRP, to almost every bank, every country, every entity. I truly do believe it's going to be mass adoption. I got a hell of a video. So on this new group I found, we'll discuss a little bit about that. So I figured I'd just do like a recap video and throw it all together in one Ripple mass adoption package. Like I said, I've tied Ripple to the IMF, the High Level Advisory Board, the Faster Payments Task Force, the Faster Payments Steering Committee, the IMF, the World Bank, the HSBC, JP Morgan, Wells and Fargo, Bank of Montreal, Federal Reserve, Bill Gates, Clinton Initiative, 189 countries, Alipay, Amazon, Microsoft, PayPal, United Nations Capital Fund, Visa, MasterCard, Coinbase, Bath, HSBC, IBM, M&T, Netflix, Navy, Federal Credit Union, New England Clearinghouse. And that's what I said. I said that regulators aren't concerned with Ripple or XRP being a security. What I said is they are building regulatory framework for this technology, for the settlement of securities, for the settlement in clearinghouses, for the settlement of commodities, stocks, bonds. This technology will be mass adoption. That is for sure.
Ryan, the blockchain hype cycle. Help us cut to the chase here. Where are we? What's real? We hear loads and loads of blockchain activity going on out there. Then we also hear a lot of it's really not past proof of concept. But both of you have business models that are using blockchain actively. Tell us about it.
Certainly. So from a high-level context perspective, blockchain has become a hashtag term. It is an overhyped term at the moment. But what we're seeing in blockchain, it's a similar cycle in other innovation breakthroughs. Now, I'll use the Ford Model T as the example. The Ford Model T was the first automobile in the US that was broadly available. There was a lot of hype around it when it first came out. Like, this could solve many use cases and revolutionize commerce. But what we saw, we were limited to that one design. So over time, the automobile entered a long period of specialization, like taking that one design and specializing it per use case. And today we have a wide variety of models. An 18-wheeler to move goods, your minivan to move your family, your sports car to move fast. Each design specialized for the use case. What we're seeing in blockchain right now is the same evolution cycle. We're in this period of specialization where companies are identifying use cases and specializing the technology for that specific use case. Several of the primary use cases right now: cross-border payments, securities trading reconciliation, trade finance, We had digital identity mentioned earlier. All applicable problems for the tech, but problems that are completely different in nature. The pain points, the capabilities you need, the regulations for each of those activities vary greatly. So in our view, it's not going to be one blockchain for everything will sit on top of, but many different solutions specialized for that very particular use case. So you can specialize things like data privacy and a unique way of using it for identity, or scalability, as Ripple specialized in for a payment system for financial institutions. So we're in this period of specialization right now. When a company is in that specialization period, in our view, successful fintech is the convergence of three things. It's financial services, it's engineering, the technology you're using, and it's regulation. So it's the convergence and balance of those three inputs at day one in your product design cycle. So taking all of these characters, these variables, and putting it from day one in how you're going to develop a product for a market. So we're seeing many companies in the sector now in that process. Engaging with regulators, engaging with the market, and optimizing the technology to create a solution that's specialized there. Ripple's done that, focused on cross-border payments.
Hello, and welcome to our live broadcast event coming to you from the Money Museum at the Federal Reserve Bank of Chicago. I'm standing here next to $1 million in cash, and today we're going to talk about money and how to move it faster. My name is Sean Rodriguez, your host for today's broadcast. Over the past couple of years, I've been honored to serve as the Federal Reserve's Faster Payment Strategy Leader and chair of the Fed-sponsored Faster Payments Task Force. I'm here with several of my payments industry colleagues to talk to you about the coming transformation of our nation's payment system. You'll hear from these newly minted Faster Masters via two live panel discussions on today's program, as well as through taped interviews that will be played over the next 30 minutes. Now, as you know, businesses and consumers are all beginning to demand faster, smarter payments anytime, anywhere, and to anyone. Over the next half hour, we'll lay out the Faster Payments Task Force's findings, showcase what it will take to develop a payment system of the future, and describe what this means for consumers and businesses across the country. Now, today marks the release of the Faster Payment Task Force's final report, The U.S. Path to Faster Payments, a call to action. I invite you to read and share the report with others, which is now available at fasterpaymentstaskforce.org. We believe the task force work complements recent and emerging payments innovations in our country, and that this work will help set the stage for additional industry action to achieve the vision of a faster, ubiquitous, broadly inclusive, safe, and efficient payment system in the U.S. by 2020. Did I say 2020? Only 3 years from now? I sure did, echoing the 320 payments industry stakeholders that served on the task force. These members represent an unprecedented mix of financial institutions, businesses, consumer advocacy groups, government agencies, fintech firms, and many, many others. In the report, the task force lays out an ambitious, near-term vision for the U.S. payment system, as well as outlining 10 recommendations for specific activities to support the goal. The goal is a shiny new payment system that will deliver broad benefits to American consumers and businesses by delivering real-time, data-rich payments. The report also includes a treasure trove of ideas for implementing faster payment capabilities. In the report, you'll find expert assessments of 16 end-to-end faster payment solution proposals. Rich dialogue between task force members and solution providers was key to enhancing these proposals. By design, the task force did not pick a winner or a best solution. We're going to leave that for the marketplace to decide. This same dialogue informed the final phase of task force work, which included development of the vision, goals, and recommendations that appear in the final report. Now, I don't want to steal all the thunder from my payments colleagues, so during the course of this broadcast, you'll hear greater detail from them concerning the task force vision, goals, recommendations, and proposal assessment process. So with that, Here's a video that sets the stage for our panel conversation, and I'll be back with you in a minute.
Faster payments in the United States are very different than faster payments elsewhere in the world. There are thousands of financial institutions, there's no regulatory mandate, and there's just a lot of complexity and differing opinions.
The things we're hearing today are people are confused by our current payment system. Some payments get there in 2 days, some get there 1 day, 3 days. It's very confusing when they look at the fact they can send a text to a friend with a big file attached. They're like, why can't I send my money immediately as well?
One of the things I think really makes the U.S. market interesting from a faster payments perspective is just how diverse and robust the landscape is, and that has historically accommodated a lot of really great opportunities. But when it comes to trying something new, it can be a journey, it can be a process.
I think the thing that made this journey unique is the public-private sector partnership that we've developed since day one. Early on in the process, there were many people that asked the Federal Reserve to step up in a collaboration and leadership role, and to their credit, they did that. And we've constructed this task force and this dialogue over several years now. So that public-private sector partnership and the collaboration that has resulted from those extensive discussions over many, many years has made this a unique process.
The journey to faster payments has been so unusual in that it's brought so many different stakeholders to the table, and it's really fantastic to have the consumer interest represented along this process. So to be able to raise concerns about folks that are otherwise left out of the traditional banking system and may have different access to payments has been really fantastic.
So we've been at this for 2 years. We did a lot of foundational work to understand where the U.S. was in the payments environment vis-a-vis other markets. We worked very hard at creating effectiveness criteria, what we think are aspirational attributes that we want to see in a faster payments environment in the United States. We invited the fintech community to submit proposals. We reviewed, assessed those proposals. Based upon all of that work, we looked at what the next steps should be in the U.S., and that's where the foundation is for the recommendations.
The final report's really a call to action. It says what's wrong with our payment system today. It says we need to work together in order to improve it, and it shows in the end that we can make payments faster and people will understand why money moves the way it moves today.
I think that this is going to enable money to move in new, faster, more innovative ways, which will ultimately create new business cases and new product opportunities and service opportunities that weren't viable the way money moved in the past.
We're going to see at least 2, maybe 4 faster payment systems implemented this year, and without the task force, I don't think you'd have seen that.
Yeah, I think this is transformational for the banking industry and for payments in general, because we will get to what people expect. They will click on a button, the money will get there, and the receiver will have it right away. It's really pretty simple, but it's been very complex up until now.
It all started with this article I found right here. We'll start with the newest group I found. And like I said, sometimes, I do find old information, but here on CKJ Crypto News, that's what I love doing. I love showing the foundation that Ripple XRP has built. Once you see the foundation that Ripple is building, you understand that this is global adoption. It's going to happen. It's inevitable. It's an honor to be selected for the U.S. State Regulatory's new advisory board. Here's another group I found. New advisory board working to modernize next gen. Now this is the CSBC announces Fintech advisory panel members. Envision 2020 Initiative, Amazon, PayPal, and 31 others to help modernize multi-state license supervision. Multi-state license supervision. And what also I'm saying is, like I said, is technology is ahead of innovation, innovation ahead of regulation. Now, it's even worse when we're talking about global regulatory rules. It's global rules, state-to-state rules. That's what they're working on right now as we speak. XRP pioneers. Now, if you look at the tweet right down here, he says, I will focus, and with this group, I will focus on payments, new tech, virtual currency framework, virtual currencies, that XRP framework, because this is the first time we're going to be using digital assets like this, which is XRP, in ways to enable consistency and coordination across state lines. Matter of fact, let me like that. And there's Dr. T. Shout out to Dr. T. He's a hell of a guy in the XRP community. We'll like that too. So this is a quick video I found on this. It's the CSBC Vision for 2020 in Fintech of Non-Bank Regulators. We'll watch like the first minute of it. Just pay close attention to the wording in this.
Fintech is changing the way consumers access financial services. From getting a mortgage online to transferring money from your smartphone, Fintech is modernizing our financial system. That's why we need an updated regulatory approach, one that supports innovation while protecting consumers. And that's what state financial regulators are working on. They regulate the vast majority of U.S. banks, but they also are the main regulators of non-banking services, money transmission, lending and payments, that are the bread and butter of fintech companies. So, what's the regulatory game plan? CSBS Vision 2020, a broad sweep of initiatives that is transforming the licensing and supervision of fintechs and other non-banks. A system that allows fintechs, large and small, to get up and running faster, expand more easily, and just as important, operate in a safe and sound manner. Vision 2020 includes an advisory panel of fintech leaders who are identifying pain points and proposing possible solutions.
Okay, so it's an advisory panel, and we just discovered that Ryan Zagone is working on that advisory panel to eliminate pain points for transactions. And I'm pretty sure his highest recommendation is XRP.
Welcome back to the set here at the Money Museum at the Federal Reserve Bank of Chicago. I'm now joined by three of my esteemed colleagues that worked on the task force. And we're going to talk a little bit about the task force process, how it gets stood up, and what the purpose of it all was. And I'm thrilled to have Jim Reuter here to my left, who's the CEO of First Banks of Colorado. You just saw him on the video. Christina Tetrial from Consumer Union. She also had a spot on the video. And then Bradley Wilkes, who's a fintech CEO for Wingcash. So, folks, thanks for joining us on the set here today. And I want to start with you, maybe, Christina, with some questions about the current payment system. You know, what is the impact of the current payment system on consumers?
Sure. So the current payment system, unfortunately, can be slow and it can be opaque for consumers. And that can lead to consumer confusion and uncertainty. So for example, if I were to pay a bill today, those funds might not be applied until Tuesday, of next week. That can lead to a late payment or some other money misstep that can be costly for consumers. In terms of being opaque, that applies, an example of the opacity of the current system is if I'm going to receive a payment, I don't necessarily know when I'm going to be able to use that money. So if I were to receive payment for a service that I'd render today, I may not be able to use that money until the end of next week. And that can lead to a reliance on short-term credit or other expensive payments.
Mm-hmm. Right. What we're also seeing, though, as a part of this improvement and some of the gaps that fintech companies will fill as they address these issues is greater control for consumers. So in the future, as we look to improvement in the payment system, we'll see improved control for consumers.
Along those same lines, as a banker, one of the things I hear from customers is, why is it so hard to move money to another person? They have a phone in their hand, they can attach a picture, send it to a friend in Berlin, and it gets there right away. They're wondering, why can't I move money that easily as well?
So let's talk a little bit about the task force formation and how it came together. And maybe, Jim, I can lean on you to talk a little bit about what this whole process is about and how the group got together.
Yeah, so between 2013 and 2015, the Fed, with input from the private and public sector, did an assessment of our current payment system and said, you know what, this is not kept up with the advances in technology. So in early 2015, the Fed put out a call for volunteers, and much to everybody's amazement, over 300 people came forward. And the makeup of that group was very diverse. You had financial institutions, regulators, consumer groups, businesses, retailers, standards bodies. And what's been amazing is for the last 2 years, this group has come together, each with their own perspectives and issues that they wanted to make sure were addressed by a new payment system, reached across the aisle, and produced the final report, the call to action on how we're going to move forward. And I'd be remiss in not complimenting the Fed team that made that happen, because I got to tell you, when I showed up at the first meeting and saw 300 people, I'm like, there's no way this is going to work. But they made it happen.
So the other important thing that he brought up is the volunteer effort. Mm-hmm. So we're all about the money, but this was a volunteer effort. The solution proposers that came forth, they were not compensated by the Fed or the task force. for their work in bringing forth solution proposals. So very tremendous effort on the part of everybody engaged in this.
Excellent point. So, of course, we have the report now that we've issued. Bradley, some of the key findings, what would you point to from your perspective of the report?
Incredible work done, incredible report. The golden nuggets in there are obviously the recommendations. Also the solution proposals that were presented, over 33,000 pages of work and assessments by the QIAT. Some of the recommendations that are important is the formation of a work group to put together a governance framework. Obviously, we're addressing cross-border, which is significant and important for us as a U.S. economy. We send over $120 billion a year annually to other countries. And so we're addressing that by saying, hey, we want the faster payment system to also be able to address those kinds of transactions as well. We're also looking at emerging technologies. So we're going to see some things like distributed ledgers and digital currencies, and those are going to have an impact on these new designs of faster payment systems.
So, yeah, sure.
Sorry, so one thing I would add is the effectiveness criteria that the task force developed, and that's the standards or the blueprints by which proposals were evaluated. And they really provide a great guide for how to build a safe, ubiquitous, and efficient payment system. And I think that's a tremendous resource both for the task force, but it's also an output that can guide industry and providers moving forward and really show how to bake in the consumer protections that are really important.
So Bradley talked about the proposals, and sounds like an awful lot of material that was reviewed. Christina, how did 320 people sift through all of this great new thinking and manage that process?
So in order to ensure an objective and independent assessment, the task force decided to hire a qualified independent assessment team to do that evaluation against the effectiveness criteria. And over the course of many months and with dialogue with the proposers, those evaluations were done and completed. And really, I think the proof will be in the pudding when people look over the results in the paper.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to stick with you because you're kind of representing the end users here, both consumers and businesses. But what does it really mean, these potential benefits to consumers and benefits with this new payment alternative?
I think all end users will enjoy a safer, faster, and more transparent payment system when these recommendations are implemented. And so an example of what what speed means for consumers and businesses is that it can mean increased working capital. So if I work today and I earn funds, I can spend that at the grocery store and put food on the table. That may mean a decreased reliance on expensive credit. In terms of transparency, I have a greater understanding of where my money is and when, and that really is about better money management. It's about not incurring those late fees and other money missteps that can happen.
There's been one thing, often we hear the word faster payments and think it's all about faster. It's actually about shorthand. That's shorthand for, hey, the systemic improvement that's coming, this new payment capability that will be a part of our nation's economic fabric.
So, to expand on it, give you an example of what Christina was talking about in terms of a small business. Plumber comes to your house, does some work. Today, he or she leaves, creates an invoice, sends it to you, you turn around, mail back a check, or set it up on bill pay. I see a day where they'll be able to electronically deliver you an invoice right there. You'll get it on your electronic device, pay it, and the transaction's done. Plumber has the money and quick availability to their funds.
Excellent example. That's great. So one of the things I want to pull out here is this term ubiquity. And Jim, I'll stick with you if I can. Not an easy term to wrestle with, but we've wrestled with that for the last couple of years. What does ubiquity mean, and why is it important in this whole dialogue about a new, faster payment system?
Yeah, ubiquity is a word none of us use, and now we say it all the time, so it's kind of interesting. But in its simplest form, it means I can pay anyone, and the experience is very user-friendly. And that's not how our payment system works today. So if I wanted to send you money today with a person-to-person service, I would have to ask you what network you're part of, what app you're using. And it should just be easier than that. A good example I give is if I want to make a cell phone call to you, I say, what's your cell phone number? I don't ask you who's your carrier, what device do you have. I call the number and the call goes through. And if we deliver on the 10 recommendations that are in the final report, that's the outcome we'll have for our customers.
Super. So you folks have talked a bit about the effectiveness criteria. We have a video coming up to kind of bring some of that more to life on top of your comments. But thanks for the conversation on setting up the task force. Let's turn to the video now, and we'll get a little more insight on the effectiveness criteria.
Good afternoon, and thank you on behalf of the Federal Reserve System for joining us today. I'm Dave Saponaro, First Vice President of the Federal Reserve Bank of St. Louis, and beginning next month, the new Payment Strategy Director for the Federal Reserve System. I'm honored to assume leadership of our efforts to improve the end-to-end speed, efficiency, and security of the nation's payment system, as described in our January 2015 paper, Strategies for Improving the U.S. Payment System. Earlier this month, the Federal Reserve published another paper, Federal Reserve Next Steps in the Payments Improvement Journey, in which we outline the next phase of work on this important initiative. In this broadcast, you'll hear more about the progress to date and challenges, and the specific initiatives planned to continue the momentum toward a better payment system. Joining me for this discussion are Federal Reserve Governor Jay Powell and Esther George, President and CEO of the Federal Reserve Bank of Kansas City. Governor Powell, who took office in May 2012, co-chairs the Federal Reserve Payments Improvement Oversight Committee with responsibility for overseeing implementation of the paper strategies. Esther George, President of the Kansas City Fed since 2011, serves as executive sponsor of the Federal Reserve's activities supporting payment system improvement. She also chairs the Federal Reserve Committee responsible for overseeing the Federal Reserve Bank's payments businesses and providing direction with respect to the evolving payment system. I've asked Jay and Esther to offer their thoughts and some perspective on what has been accomplished so far and what lies ahead. Afterwards, we'll entertain questions submitted by the public and our viewers since the Next Steps paper's release on September 6th. Let's begin with Governor Powell. Jay, would you get us started by talking generally about the U.S. payment system, where we are in this multi-year effort to make improvements, including our shared vision for the future?
Thanks, Dave. As you know, in the U.S., much of our traditional payment system operates on decades-old infrastructure that has adjusted slowly to the evolving demands for greater speed and safety. Our payments landscape is also large and diverse, with a wide array of financial institutions and service providers, which can make large-scale improvements difficult and time-consuming to implement. So with that in mind, it's easy to understand why some form of coordinated action is the best way to pursue fundamental and successful nationwide improvement. The Federal Reserve has a long history of successful collaboration with the private sector to make payment system improvements. Importantly, we believe that proactive industry initiatives and collaboration provide the best way to address the needs and opportunities that are evident in today's payments landscape. Stakeholders from virtually every sector of the payments industry espouse this philosophy as well. A collaborative approach ensures that changes are designed by those whose commitment and expertise are needed to achieve the desired outcome. And in these efforts, the Fed has been and will continue to be a leader and a catalyst for change. Our next steps convey our commitment to providing the infrastructure for industry work efforts where needed, with the goal of being inclusive and effective in advancing that work. The Federal Reserve has often made use of its ability to convene stakeholders in the payment system and encourage them to identify issues and work together to make fundamental improvements. We took that approach back in 2015 when we convened two separate task forces. These efforts set the payments industry on course to develop safe, real-time, ubiquitous payments for consumers and businesses everywhere, and to address the most pressing security concerns in today's systems. The task forces have made significant progress over the past 2 years. The Faster Payments Task Force completed its work in July with the issuance of its final report and recommendations. The group's accomplishments included creating effectiveness criteria for faster payments, highlighting various industry capabilities and solution proposals for faster payments, and outlining an action plan for building a safe, ubiquitous payment system. In its recommendations, the Faster Payments Task Force recognized the Fed's unique capability to facilitate industry agreement and called for our support in advancing a number of collaborative work efforts. At the same time, we also focused heavily on the absolute need to make payments safe and secure for both the sender and the receiver in any financial transaction. The Secure Payments Task Force has dedicated itself to bringing a security focus to faster payments criteria and solution proposals, in addition to envisioning a path forward for stronger security across other payment systems and processes. Later this year, you'll see the first of several work products coming from these efforts. The Next Steps paper, published earlier this month, acknowledges this progress as well as the considerable market activity aligned with our desired outcomes for payments improvement. It puts forward a series of refreshed strategies and describes 9 new tactics the Federal Reserve will employ in collaboration with the payments industry to make further progress. In addition to the tactics described in this Next Steps paper, the Federal Reserve will continue to advance the initiatives currently ongoing, consistent with the original strategies paper. Soon, we envision faster payments capabilities for moving money in near real time that are safe and available to every American consumer and business. We also envision a secure payment system that enjoys unfaltering public confidence. The driving force behind this security will be a proactive and nimble payments ecosystem that effectively responds to the rapidly evolving threat environment. We envision this safer, faster, more efficient payment system not just for the payments we make at the corner store or to the babysitter, but for the payments made while traveling abroad or to receivers in a foreign country. As we reaffirm our commitment to advancing payment improvements through these next steps, we echo our original call for all stakeholders to engage and continue their commitment to improving the U.S. payment system. It's an ambitious vision for the future, Dave, given the difficult challenges inherent in each of these goals. But it's achievable through continued cooperation and collective commitment from all of us, the Fed and the industry, to these outcomes.
How do you maintain stability, yet drive innovation in the world's largest economy? For the Federal Reserve, part of the solution is creating a better payment system. With the help of a diverse range of stakeholders, including the broader payments community, the Faster Payments Task Force developed 6 categories of criteria for effective solutions. Ubiquity, to ensure payments can be sent and received by any consumer or business. Efficiency. Efficiency is achieved in an environment that's competitive, innovative, and adaptable. Safety and security, to boost trust in the system, minimize fraud, resolve errors quickly, and protect all assets and information. Speed, to provide complete access to funds and visibility of transactions in near real time. Legal, an effective system complies with the rules and laws designed to define obligations of all parties and protect consumers and data. Governance, to effectively and inclusively support transparent processes that serve the public interest. Achieving the payment system envisioned by these criteria is aspirational, but can be achieved through a combination of private sector innovation and industry collaboration. Stakeholders can engage by building the infrastructure needed to reach all users, establishing rules and governance that serve all interests, and anticipating future needs and evolving the ecosystem to ensure safety and sustainability. By meeting the challenge, we can implement a faster, more inclusive, and secure payment system in the United States. Learn more about the U.S. path to faster payments at fasterpaymentstaskforce.org.
For real-time settlements. So I also did a little bit of digging on this. CSBC announced its Fintech Advisory Panel and its members. Washington, D.C. today, the Conference of State Bank Supervisors announced that 33 financial technology companies have agreed to serve on the CSBC Fintech Industry Advisory Panel. The panel brings together state regulators and industry leaders who will identify ways to help modernize the state regulatory system. Reflecting on high-level interests, state regulators accepted a large number of companies, from startups to national brands. So if we go down here a little bit farther, I'd just like to... The advisory panel will have 3 working groups: money transmission and payments, lending and community banking, and innovation. Panel members and state regulators will discuss existing pain points and identify opportunities to improve multi-state licensing and supervision. The panel will kick off with a conference call later this month. The advisory panel is a key element of the CSBC Vision 2020, initiatives designed to forge an integrated 50-state licensing supervisory system for non-depository financial institutions, including fintechs, while ensuring safety and soundness of consumer protection. But on this group right here, there's a few big names on this group that really stuck out to me. One is Alipay USA, there's Amazon Payments, BitPay, Circle, and Lending Club. Was on there, Lend Up, and we got PayPal, and what do we see? The one and only Ripple. There's Ripple on that list. So here's a whole nother group that Ripple's working with. That's kind of huge. So after I found that new connection there with Ryan Zagone working with even more on another group, I said I might as well just make a video where I just combine all the groups that he's working with in just one quick little XRP video. So if you guys are familiar with some of these stuff, maybe we've discussed prior, but I just figured I just want to put it all in one video. So anyway, Ryan Zagone recognized as BAF Future Leader. Now BAF is Bankers Association of Finance and Trade. Bankers Association for Finance and Trade launched a program in 2016. You notice that all these groups are starting around 2015, 2016, 2017, and Ryan Zagone is in every one of them. I mean, what's that tell you? They've created these new groups to harness this innovative technology. That's what's going on here. Now, this BAF group right here is it's the class of 2017, and just some of the names that are in this group that Ryan Zagone is working with are huge. Let's just go through a couple of names on this list. JP Morgan. There's Ripple right there, HSBC, Bank of Maryland, Western Union, Bank of Montreal. I pretty much read the list of names in the beginning, and these are just all the groups that Ryan Zagone is working with. But here's something I thought was really, really interesting right here. Here's the Fintech Exchange IMF World Bank Spring Meeting. So this is the World Bank right here. And who do we have going to be at this World Bank meeting? And it's all about distributed ledger technology, cross-border payments, and financial inclusion. And guess who is the star speaker? Ryan Zagone, Director of Regulatory Relations. Now check this one out. Ripple's Ryan Zagone is a Director of Regulatory Relations at Ripple, a payment technology company, one of the 50 smartest companies, of course, by MIT, and the receipt of the World Economic Forum's Technology Pioneer Award. Ripple Pioneers, XRP Pioneers, of course we're using terms like that. Zagone manages Ripple's relations with more than 30 central banks and regulators. Zagone is a delegate to the IMF's High-Level Advisory Group on Fintech. Now watch this one. He also serves on the advisory board of the United Nations Better Than Cash Alliance. Now that's why I believe that Bearable Guy 123 did the picture of the United Nations and all the flags. You know, the Ripple sign is, the Ripple logo is on the Malta flag, but oh yeah, and then we had the Malta being the leader of XRP trading also. But I do believe that also Big BG 123 did that picture, and Ripple came out with a video also showing the building of the UN. They're dropping breadcrumbs to us. They're basically saying that this technology is going to be mass adoption.
Okay, we're back here at the Money Museum at the Federal Reserve Bank of Chicago. I'm joined now with a new set of panelists, and to my left here is Jan Estep. She's the CEO of Nacha. To her left is Tom Ray. He's the Senior Executive of our Payment Strategy at U.S. Bank. And then to his left one more time is Steve Ledford, who's leading the real-time payment system development effort for the Clearinghouse. So thanks for joining me on the panel discussion today, you three. What we talked about in the last panel was more about how the task force was set up and the effectiveness criteria and all of that. But I'd really like to focus on, with you three, is what next? You know, we laid out some recommendations, vision, goals, all of that. So I want to focus our discussion on what's going to happen now that we've issued our final report today and what's going to ensue. So if I could, Tom, I'd like to start with you. And you know, give us your sense for how these findings will impact payments in the U.S. moving forward.
Great. Thanks, Sean. I think the final report has a great amount of information in it. And I think there's 2 or 3 great examples. So if you look at the effectiveness criteria, as the previous panel mentioned, there's a lot of requirements in there, specifications in there, and the fintechs have been able to use that. In fact, many use them to put it in their proposals. But I think the financial institutions have an opportunity to utilize that document and rationalize their business strategy around faster payments. I think a second example would be the recommendations. There's many great recommendations coming out of the task force, but some of those sort of relate around the interoperability. In this country, we're going to have multiple service providers, and in order to move a transaction through multiple service providers, we're going to need that kind of collaboration between those organizations. I mean, the consumer expects when they initiate a payment that it'd be seamless, it would be safe and secure, it would be transparent, and of course it would be fast. And so we need to have that interoperability so every transaction will move that way. And finally, I think that the call for action that comes out of the task force paper is maybe even the most important. And the key component of that, obviously, is the whole market awareness. I mean, there's millions of folks that we need to make this network successful, and many of those need to understand the benefits of faster payment and how it relates to their personal lives. So I think a lot of great work has come out of that faster payments final report.
Super. So, Steve, if I could turn to you. We talked in the previous panel, Tom talked a little bit about it in terms of the proposals. 16 proposals in the report, I think 3,100 pages of material and assessments and all of that. What did some of the proposals entail? If you give us a flavor for that.
Absolutely. The first thing I'd like to point out is that I think the approach we went through shows the wisdom of not trying to enforce a top-down solution. If you look in many other countries, someone, whether it was a governmental entity, central bank, said this is what we're going to do, and was fairly prescriptive. What we did here instead was say, here are criteria. And by the way, the criteria really gave a lot of guidance to those who are proposing solutions on what the country wants, not just what financial institutions, not just what the Fed wants, but what the country wants. I think it drew out a lot of ingenuity. We saw completely new and different ways of moving money being proposed, the clearing and the settlement of transactions. We also thought entirely new ways of thinking about money. What is money? Security, very important. A lot of the proposals dealt at great depth with ways of making sure that payments are safe and secure. And there were a lot of really good ideas about how to make it easy to send money, very much the way that Jim Morty was talking about on the earlier panel. The final thing, the fact that there are 16 proposals, and by the way, there are others out there in the industry who are also using these criteria, as Tom mentioned, to come up with really good ideas around payments. It illustrates the fact nobody's going to be able to do this alone. It's going to take all of us working together to bring faster payments to the United States.
You know, the robustness of the proposals that you mentioned, Steve, is, I think, also very representative of the fact that end users have a lot of different needs, right? So if you're a consumer, you're sending it to, your neighbor, or if you're a small business or a corporate, there's subtleties in each one of those payments that require different support structures, and I think the robustness of the proposals showed that there are different ways to meet those varying needs, too.
Absolutely.
So if I could stick with you, Jan, because we've talked about some recommendations, Tom mentioned that. Bring those to life for us a bit in terms of what's actually in those recommendations and what's next.
Yeah, the recommendations themselves were very thoughtful on behalf of the task force, and I think we need to remember that the report itself was a result of many different organizations coming together over the last couple of years. So when we think about what's in the future and how to attack those recommendations, this collaborative process really will continue into the future. I think it's important to understand the report within that light. So for example, there is an interim collaborative work group that has already been formed by the task force, and its constituency are individuals from each one of the different segments that were in the task force. So again, a very diverse group. And when we reflect upon that, for example, I'm in an organization that prepares rules and standards for a variety of payment types, and we understand that inclusiveness in that process, hearing different voices along the way, are very important. And the task force recognized that as some of the recommendations were put in place. So as we think about interoperability that Tom mentioned, there will be a work group thinking about how to best reach, that interoperability between solutions. There'll be another work group focused on security and making sure that when diverse parties are coming together technologically, that there is perhaps a minimum security standard that can give that confidence to everyone using the system. So it clearly will be a market-driven approach, much better than having kind of a prescriptive or strict regulation that isn't as flexible over time. We'll be able to be flexible with technology, with changes to the environment and changes with user needs. And I think that'll be important for the future.
I kind of look at this interim collaboration work group and these other work groups you talked about as kind of the baton handing off from the task force to real work that needs to continue to drive us to those desired outcomes. So, great,
absolutely.
Thank you. So, Steve, if you could make this real for businesses and other stakeholders and banks and other financial services providers, how do they get involved and what do they need to do?
Well, first of all, I like the baton has been passed and we now need to do something with all the really good work that's been done. First, we need to realize this is a big deal. I mean, this is a once-in-a-generation opportunity to create an entirely new payment system and do it deliberately based on new ways of looking at how we want to move money and new ways of making it convenient and useful. So it's going to call on all of us. It's going to call on financial institutions, banks and credit unions. It's going to call on payment service providers to come up with and bring to market those innovative products and services so folks can actually use this payment system. It's going to call on those who are building the infrastructure to work together to make it something that can achieve the ubiquity that's so important in the report and make it work and make it work well. It's going to call on those who are in the organizations that represent and educate consumers, business users, various folks. It's going to call on the press to really do a really good job of educating people on what this new payment system is, how it's different, and how to use it and use it well. It's going to call on businesses to take a good hard look at their own way of doing things and their operations and see how can I make it better using these new tools. And very importantly, I think Jim on the first panel said that folks expect more now. I think from a consumer point of view, they have an important job and is to keep expecting more. And that's going to draw forth the type of solutions that will really make this successful.
Super. So, Jan, you know, we've got the recommendations, we've got vision, goals. What does success look like to you? And I'll ask the other question to the others, but tell us a bit about that.
You know, the report started off by saying we want a faster, ubiquitous, efficient, safe system. And the question is, what does that really mean in the end? And I think it will perhaps be more of a qualitative assessment of success versus quantitative as we move into the future. And certainly part of it will be evaluating the path. Have we been inclusive? Have we been responsive to needs? But clearly, the ability to make a payment to anyone, as Jim talked about earlier, will be success as it defines our new payment system. And we have the opportunity now here in the U.S. to kind of make it our own. The process can be our own, the solution can be our own, and success will be really if we meet the needs of our specific country. And that'll be great for the future of our payments ecosystem.
Yeah, my point of view of success is basically when I don't think about it anymore and I just start utilizing faster payments as opposed to another payment opportunity. And I think that's going to take us some time in this country to sort of migrate that way. But I think as the consumers go down that path, they'll eventually start just using faster payments as a normal course of business. Now, speaking of the business side, I think that's a little bit more difficult for them. There's a lot of work, as Steve said, for them to make some changes inside of their organizations. But I think they too will soon see the benefits of a faster payment transaction in certain cases. So I think we'll have some great success here in the near term.
Not long from now, everybody will be using it and nobody will think about it because it's just the way you do things.
Exactly.
Excellent. Thank you three for the discussion about what next. Very important to tee up the next work that comes along. So Jan, Tom, and Steve, we appreciate that. We also want to thank our other panelists today, and more importantly, or as importantly, we want to thank all of the task force members for their commitment to this important work over the past 2 years. Bradley mentioned earlier, this was a volunteer army that showed up for this, and all of you and your colleagues brought it home. So here we are now with the ask. We're asking your commitment Today, we've made the case for action on the part of all payment stakeholders. We ask you to support this effort by taking the following actions. Embrace the vision and the effectiveness criteria that we've talked about today and that's documented in the report. Actively participate in the ongoing dialogue. And if possible, contribute to the work groups that Jan talked about and the recommendations for the follow-on work streams for the deliverables we're envisioning. And then most importantly, take the needed steps to make your own organization Faster Payments ready by 2020. For more information and to download the full task force report, please visit fasterpaymentstaskforce.org. Thank you so much for joining us today, and we look forward to working with you to build the payment system of the future.
Thank you for those perspectives, Jay. Esther, perhaps you could share more about the new tactics that are part of this Next Steps paper. They include facilitating industry agreement to address a number of key issues, but also contemplate whether the Fed will need to play an operational role to achieve the desired outcomes.
Thank you, Dave. As Jay mentioned, our next steps reflect an ongoing need for industry engagement across all of the desired outcomes. I'll speak to those first. One area noted by the Faster Payments Task Force as important to achieving its vision is an industry-led governance framework for decision-making. To this end, the Fed is chairing and facilitating an industry work group referred to in the Next Steps paper as the Interim Collaboration Work Group, or ICWG. This group's membership mirrors the task force in its broad representation and inclusive approach to its work. The group will publish and seek comment on its recommendations from all payment system stakeholders with an ambitious goal to implement the governance framework in 2018. The task force also asked for the Federal Reserve's help to initiate the groundwork for some of the key components of the Faster Payments Governance Framework, including rules and standards, directory models, and legal and regulatory frameworks, all of which will ultimately be considered and implemented by the governance entity. On the payment security front, we will continue supporting industry efforts, most notably in the near term through the Secure Payments Task Force, with the potential for additional targeted efforts as needs are identified. Early next year, the Federal Reserve will undertake a payment security study that will help to define the nature of future industry engagement, focusing on opportunities that will have the greatest impact on mitigating the incidence and cost of fraud for all participants in the system. This study will assess payment security vulnerabilities, identify contributing factors and potential mitigation approaches, and consider the incentives of participants to implement strong payment security. As recent events have highlighted, data breaches and cybercrime pose significant threats to the public's confidence in our payment system. We must continue to work to reduce these risks and advance the safety, security, and resiliency of the payment system. We all recognize the importance of our collective focus here, and I encourage organizations that are not yet participating in these efforts to join us. Collaboration has been and will continue to be core to enhancing the efficiency of domestic and cross-border payments. Through analysis and industry dialogue, we will continue to seek more clearly the drivers of continued check use and barriers to cross-border payment improvements. With this deeper understanding, industry efforts can be focused on implementing solutions. The tactics I've mentioned reflect our continued commitment to drive progress as a leader and convener of industry stakeholders. We will also consider how our role as a service provider might address the challenges in achieving these desired outcomes, as the task force and other industry stakeholders have recommended. Our plans call for pursuing settlement services that address the future needs of a ubiquitous, real-time retail payments environment. We've made enhancements in recent years to existing settlement services and expanded settlement options for private sector clearing arrangements through the recently announced availability of joint accounts. With a clearer view of the developing faster payments marketplace, we will consider alternative models for enhancing our settlement mechanisms to support real-time retail payments over the long term. Beyond settlement services, we'll evaluate the need for other capabilities in the faster payments ecosystem and whether the Federal Reserve should provide them. Our analysis will explore a range of options in the context of current and potential market developments and challenges and the conditions that might indicate that our operational role is needed. Of course, core to this assessment, the Federal Reserve will be guided by its criteria for offering new products and services. These criteria include the need to fully recover cost over the long term, the expectation that the new service will yield clear public benefit, and the expectation that other providers alone cannot be expected to provide the service with reasonable effectiveness, scope, and equity. The outcome of our analysis will be shared publicly, and any proposals for new services will be published for comment consistent with our long-standing policies. The bottom line is this. We are counting on the continued commitment we've observed from so many stakeholders over the past 2 years to continue to advance this important work.
Thank you, Esther, for highlighting some key aspects of the Next Steps plan.
Basically, right here, here's the IMF. The IMF just finished its first high-level meeting on blockchain, and there's Ryan Zagone right here. Ryan Zagone's at that meeting. And also Ryan Zagone, Director of Regulatory Relations at Ripple, and also Chris Larson is in this group too. I'm not going to hold the video up, but Chris Larson's also involved in this group right here. Now, if you're curious a little bit about the IMF is an International Monetary Fund, is an organization of 189 countries. Now, that's mass adoption for sure. Working to foster global monetary cooperation, secure financial stability, facilitate international trade, promote high employment and sustainable economic growth, and reduce poverty around the world. To me, that we tied it also into banking the unbanked. We tied it into the International Monetary Fund of the United Nations Capital Fund. We also tied it to the Bill Clinton Initiative. We tied it to the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, Banking the Unbanked, Coca-Cola. Also, this is 189 countries, and that's why I believe that Ripple dropped this little breadcrumb when they did the IMF building and the newly released video. So, huge tie-ins right there. Now, this is something we covered a little bit too. A week ago, Ripple Labs Director of Regulatory Relations was elected to represent the 90 corporations at the Federal Reserve Faster Payments Task Force Steering Committee. The task force was formed this year to spearhead and upgrade the payment system that have remained unchanged since the 70s. And this is exactly what I'm saying. All these new groups have been created for Ripple. This is a good for Ripple XRP because it means Ripple is well represented as a front runner for adoption by the U.S. Federal Reserve as a tool for making global payments faster. Up to this point, the primary technology that has been in use for this purpose is SWIFT. This technology is no longer efficient when compared to newer technologies like Ripple XRP. And with Zagone as a member of this task force, the Fed will most likely back Ripple XRP as a replacement. That's because it's faster, cheaper. It's faster and cheaper. Now, just a few more little, like I said, I was just highlighting all the groups that Ripple's Ryan Zagone is involved in. Ripple Labs elected to the Fed Steering Committee for Faster Payments. So that's huge. But if you go to, this is one of my favorite articles right here. The Federal Reserve Task Force, Ripple improves speed and transparency of global payments. Now this is 2 years, today after 2 years of work, the Federal Reserve released its Faster Payments Task Force action plan for bringing faster payments to the United States, highlighting Ripple's ability to underpin the next generation of cross-border payments. Fed Faster Payments Task Force gives Ripple's vote of confidence for the next gen of global payments. So that's huge. Now what's also really interesting about this is out of all the proposals that were on the table, Federal Reserve hired McKinsey & Co. I've been doing some research on McKinsey & Co. McKinsey & Co. pretty much tracks everything going on with payments and graphs and statistics. So McKinsey & Co. was hired by the Federal Reserve, And it pretty much says the task force received 22 proposals, 16 of which completed the process, including Ripple. Ripple put forth the interledger-based solution that enables improved messaging and tracking for real-time payment. Standing out is the only proposal focused on solving today's friction with cross-border payments. The McKinsey assessment gave high marks to Ripple. So basically, out of all the proposals, McKinsey & Co. chose Ripple. Now, out of the Faster Payments Task Force, this is the list of everybody that's on that Faster Payments Task Force. I mean, just a few to name some is like Coinbase. We did do a totality of a lot of names I wrote down that stuck out for me in the beginning. But, of course, you know, the one and only is on this list also. Ripple. Ryan Zagone. Another thing I thought was really interesting about this list is this is from the Faster Payments, but why would Ripple be highlighted in blue? Out of all these people, Ripple is highlighted in blue. Now, there are some other people, but far few and in between. I think it's because Ripple's the superstar. Alrighty, Ripple, alrighty, XRP pioneers. I'd like to welcome. Messed up. Thanks everybody for tuning into the show. The CKJ coin will pop up right now. Smash that coin to subscribe. If you subscribe and you haven't subscribed before, let me know what city, country, or state you're from. I want to just personally thank everybody. Let me know what you guys think about this mass adoption. Why is Ryan Zagone working with so many groups? I mean, I believe it's to familiarize them with this technology. Right now, they're working on regulation, and it's so plain and simple to see to me. Alrighty, Ripple pioneers, thank you so much. Have a wonderful day.